WTTW.
This American carnage stops right here and stops right now.
He invoked it on his first day.
America first.
He incited it through the rest of his presidency.
The Republicans understood the bargain that they were making with Donald Trump.
And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Trump's American carnage.
Tonight at 10 on WTTW. WTTW programming originates from the Renee Crown Public Media Center.
Everybody in Ireland knows about the Chicago St. Patrick's Day Parade.
It's a real way to bring the community together, and we need that so much today.
I think it really helps us define the pride that we have in the city.
The tradition will go on. We will march again next year, 2022.
This is the city. This is Chicago. This is the best place in the world to live.
Wednesday at 8 on WTTW.
Hi, I'm Brian, and you're watching WTTW.
This evening's presentation of Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Polk Brothers Foundation, working to make Chicago a place where all people have the opportunity to reach their full potential.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight,
it is an enormous challenge. It is something that is front and center for the president.
Illinois Congress members on the crisis at the border and the immigration bills before Congress this week.
The airflow is critical.
From hospitals to your home, we talk with specialists about how air filtration can help to dissipate and kill COVID.
The pandemic has taken a toll on our healthcare workers.
A rare look inside the state's largest private healthcare provider as it reflects on 1 year of treating COVID.
Illinois Comptroller Susana Mendoza on how the state will spend its share of the COVID stimulus package.
Summer concerts and fall theater schedules offer hope for a long-awaited return to live performances.
And a Gary, Indiana native is the first black woman to be nominated for an Oscar for Best Makeup and Hairstyling. We talk with her about this historic note. But first, some of today's top stories. Chicago Public Schools tells parents of high schoolers it's aiming to reopen by April 19th, the start of the fourth quarter. In an email sent to families and staff, the district says, based on the, quote, productive discussions with the Chicago Teachers Union and new guidance from the Biden administration, it believes high schools can safely be reopened. CPS also says schools may see different learning models depending on enrollment and building capacity, but that the district and CTU are discussing a hybrid structure similar to the one being used in elementary schools. For more on this story, you can visit our website. The Illinois Department of Public Health says nearly 2,000 people have been diagnosed with the coronavirus since yesterday, and another 19 have died. The state has had more than 1.2 million cases since the pandemic began, and 20,973 people have died. So far, the state says more than 12% of its population has been vaccinated. Live music fans will be pleased to hear the sounds of their favorite artists live from the Pavilion at Ravinia. The open-air music venue announces it plans to reopen in July for the summer 2021 season. Ravinia says audiences will be smaller and the number of artists on stage will also be reduced to allow for distancing. The Chicago Symphony Orchestra is also returning for its 6-week summer residency, and the full lineup of concerts will be announced in late April. Coming up later in the show, we'll have more on hopes for a return to live theater. And now to Paris with members of Illinois' congressional delegation. Paris.
Brandis, the U.S. House of Representatives is scheduled to hear 2 immigration bills this week as a surge of unaccompanied minors flood the U.S.-Mexican border. Here's what the Biden administration's Southern Border Coordinator had to say.
This administration has been in office 6 or 7 weeks. We've moved swiftly to make sure that we restore humanity to our immigration policy, and in doing so, that obviously means we have to treat people, and children especially, well.
Joining us are Congresswoman Robin Kelly, a Democrat from Madison and now chair of the Democratic Party of Illinois, Congressman Adam Kinzinger, a Republican from Shanahan, and Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, a Democrat from Schaumburg. Welcome back to all of you. Representative Krishnamurthy, I want to start with the border situation. There has been a swell in recent months of unaccompanied minors. What needs to be done in the near term to stabilize the situation there?
Well, I think what President Biden is doing makes a lot of sense in bringing some humanity to how we treat the children. Unlike before, we should not be detaining them at these border facilities, and we should be obviously resettling them into better surroundings pending their asylum cases and so forth. Long term, we have to go to the root of the problem, Paris. There's incredible violence, economic deprivation, and COVID that's coursing through their home countries. And even as we battle all of those issues on behalf of our own citizens, we have to partner with our southern neighbors to ultimately stem the tide.
And this is happening while there is criticism from the left that there still are squalid conditions at some of these detention centers, and then criticism from the right that somehow more migrants want to come because of the Biden administration's policies. Congresswoman Kelly, right now the House is expected to take up 2 immigration bills, one that would offer pathway to citizenship for the Dreamers, the minors who came here with their parents, and then for undocumented farm workers. What are the prospects of those bills?
Well, those bills are long overdue, and I think even before I came in, the group in the Senate that was bipartisan, there were 8 of them, they sent legislation over to the House that never really saw the light of day. And I think that there's many people, bipartisan, business, like you said, farmers, all kind of people that think that we need to progress and pass these bills that would be better for better for the people, better for the economy, better for agriculture if we can get these bills passed. So I'm hoping that in a bipartisan, bicameral way that we can do this.
And it would impact millions of undocumented residents here. Congressman Kinzinger, especially the DREAM Act, has seen bipartisan support in the past, although some of your Republican colleagues are saying, hold on, no action on these bills until the situation at the border is stabilized. What's your view of this legislation, and how would you vote on it?
So I'm unfortunately not going to be able to vote this week. I have military starting tomorrow, but I'm supportive of it. Look, the reality is we have to look at immigration from a real lens. We have people that are here that know no country besides this one. We're not going to deport them all, so let's fix that problem. And there's any number of things when it comes to border security that we all agree on what to do for a pathway to at least legalization. The problem is this debate has just become so toxic that everything is a big outrage now. And so I think what we need to do is, I would love to see if it was able to be done, Republicans and Democrats actually come to a solution that 80 to 90% of Americans agree on. It's my only concern with doing it piecemeal is we're not fixing the whole larger scale issue. But of course, anytime anything like that's in front of me that is the right thing to do, I would support it.
So you're saying you would rather have a more sweeping immigration overhaul, but you would support these 2 piecemeal bills?
Yeah, look, I think the way to actually fix the system is it's going to take everybody being willing to get a little bit and have to give a little bit. And right now there's so much mistrust, the right mistrust that there's ever going to be border security, the left mistrust that there's, ever going to be a pathway to legalization. And so we're in this standoff, and we use it as a weapon on both sides. I would love to see a broad, comprehensive reform done. I know it's been tried in the past, but it's always tanked by the loudest voices on the extremes.
Congressman Krishnamurthy, it would appear that at least these 2 bills, again, Dreamers and then citizenship for, or some kind of documented status for farm workers, would have support in the House. What's the prospects in the Senate? Do you think that this is the area where the filibuster would have to go away for it to pass?
I don't know what the prospects are. As you mentioned, there would need to be 10 Republican senators to basically break the filibuster and bring this to passage. I'm an immigrant myself. I'm one of the few immigrants in Congress, naturalized citizens. And so this is a very important issue to me and my constituents. 30% of my 750,000 constituents are immigrants. And these dreamers are some of the finest people you're ever going to meet. And that's why Senator Dick Durbin, our state senior senator, is pushing for this bill so strongly. And that's why I am too. These folks deserve to be here. They are American in every way, shape, and form, except on paper. And that has to change.
Congresswoman Kelly, I want to move on to the voting rights bill that the House did pass, and it faces an uncertain future in the Senate. It would, among other things, do away with forms of voter ID. It would codify lengthy early voting periods and then do away with partisan gerrymandering. What do you think is going to happen? Another area where the filibuster is going to have to go away for it to advance in the Senate?
First of all, I just want to thank my colleague, Adam Kinzinger, for his continued service to the country. Thank you so much, Adam. I think the vote is going to have a hard time. Unfortunately, we definitely need to do something because so many states are trying to pass legislation that suppresses the vote. But I do think it'll be tough to get 60 votes to pass H.R. 1, I'm assuming you're speaking of.
Correct, H.R. 1. And Congressman Kinzinger, to those efforts in state houses like Arizona, Texas, Georgia, they've passed restrictive voting bills that would shorten early voting periods, make it easier to purge voters from the rolls. As you know, critics have said that this is Republicans trying to benefit their voters and hurt Democratic voters, some saying it's a new Jim Crow, that it hurts voters of color. How do you see these efforts going on at the state level?
Well, I see, some of them, I mean, there's so many of them, I have to speak very generally. Some of them may be real attempts to say we want to make sure we have a safe and secure voting system, which we all would want. Some of them are a continuation of the big lie that the election was stolen, and somehow passing something like this is in essence tacit acknowledgement that the system was rigged and the system didn't work. So I think it's I don't want to paint them all with a broad brush. I think, in some cases we talk about shortening the time of early voting. If it's done because we don't want campaigns to start 6 months out, that's one thing. If it's done, though, to deny people the opportunity to vote, then that's wrong. I think the bottom line is we want to make sure that everybody that is eligible to vote, that wants to vote, has the ability to vote. And then as Republicans or Democrats, go out and compete on ideas and turn your people out to the polls. But I think playing games, when it's not a legitimate concern, where there isn't any real concern, is frankly, it's not even good politics, and it's wrong, for a republic like ours.
And there are some Republicans that have separated themselves from that, like the Lieutenant Governor of Georgia. We're going to have to leave it there for right now, but later in the program, we'll be joined again by the representatives to discuss things like the Equal Rights Amendment and more. But for now, our thanks to Representatives Kelly, Kinzinger, and Krishnamurthy. Thank you so much. And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, thank you. Wearing a mask, staying home, getting the vaccine. These are the methods that are likely top of mind when it comes to preventing the spread of the coronavirus. But there's another tool also, and it's in the air. Amanda Venicky joins us now with this story. Amanda, what is this tool?
Well, Brandis, by now we all know that COVID-19 is an airborne virus, which means that proper ventilation is key. But what really does that mean? To get some answers, I went to one of the experts. Marco Capacchione is the Vice President of Facilities and Support Services at University of Chicago Medicine, which really means that he oversees just this very sort of thing. Capacchione says dating back to the days of tuberculosis, hospitals have been designed to deal with infectious pathogens like COVID and containing them. They have rooms intended for patients who need to be isolated. But he says even modern hospitals, many of them anyway, were not designed for a pandemic that has raged like this one has.
The stressful thing was when we basically exceeded at one point over having more than 100 COVID patients. Not all of the building areas were designed specifically for those isolation type patients.
That meant U of C had to essentially retool 2 floors to turn them into isolation or negative pressure rooms. Now, hospitals have positive pressure rooms for surgical and oncology patients. That higher pressure keeps out outside air as well as any contaminants that may be in it. And then in isolation rooms, the pressure is negative or lower. That keeps the outside air from flowing in, traps the contaminated or the COVID air inside until it is intentionally exhausted out.
Since the patient is the source of the contaminant, what we want to do is the air to move into the room, mix with the patient air, and then we could exhaust that air out of the building.
Of course, hospitals are controlled settings, and we all hope to not be in a situation where we have to be in an isolation room. And Capacchione says that public places like restaurants, they're much tougher.
So if you had 5 people sitting in the room and you had the window open and air was blowing in, the person by the window would be getting nice, fresh, clean air. The next person over from them would be getting clean air plus the air that may have been contaminated by the first person, right? And so as you go on, so the problem is when you have multiple people in a room, it's harder to control that.
And that's where masks come in. If everyone wears one, then potentially contaminated air is more contained. Still, opening windows, even just a crack, is recommended by experts, including the CDC, to get air flowing.
If the room is not having any air changes, it just builds up and builds up concentration. So just opening a window was the great first step, then moving a portable air cleaner into the room.
John Schubert is an engineer. He is a co-owner of Glendale Heights-based Schubert Environmental. And since the late 70s, the company has basically been working to get toxins out of the air in industrial settings. And that has translated in these COVID times because both the virus and toxins are tiny particulates.
They're low mass density, smoke, cigarette smoke, or welding smoke, or smoke from machine tools, or forging, or steel mills. Those are all in the neighborhood of 1 micron or less, plus or minus, and they float. And that's exactly the same situation as the pathogen.
The company now has patented a portable air filtration device. Some Chicago area school districts have purchased them for their classrooms, and they've stayed open for much of COVID, he says, as have some restaurants. I, for one, first saw one at Gale Street Inn in Jefferson Park. Now, these devices use filters similar to what you would have in your furnace. They also have what he's dubbed a kill chamber, and there's a rotating device that uses UV rays to kill the COVID virus.
Ultraviolet is reflecting and banging all over. The virus is very fragile. We've had laboratories tell us that saw this and said, well, you don't really even need the ultraviolet. You've beat the virus to death so much already.
There is a lot on the market when it comes to air filtration systems. He says there's new technology, UV rays you can put in the ceiling for bigger businesses. But if you are looking for a home air filtration device, he says that something important is to pretty much ignore any claims about high efficiency. You want really to make sure that a device is meant for the square footage you're intended to use it for. Now, there are, again, other methods besides buying one of these devices. Repeat, open that window. Also, he says, keep your furnace running, but when you do, make sure that you have a decent filter. We've heard a lot about HEPA filters, and that's great for bigger businesses, industrial settings, but he says at home, you likely don't need that.
If you get too thick a filter, too efficient, it starts to fill and block airflow. And then your heating and air conditioning unit can not function. It'll start to slow up the air, and then what you've done is you've lost your air changes.
He says what you'll probably want to look for is one that is classified as a MERV 8 or a MERV 10 filter. And again, can't emphasize strongly enough, he says that really what is important is to keep that air from building up. You want to change the airflow by breaking it apart. He says, heck, even waving your hands can help. So I will give you a wave. Brandis, back to you.
Back to you. Thank you, Amanda. And now back to Paris with a look inside a hospital a year into the coronavirus pandemic. Paris.
Brandis, this time a year ago, hospitals were bracing for the unknown. The spread of COVID-19 accelerated in the United States, which meant a coming storm for the nation's healthcare infrastructure. We got an exclusive look inside Illinois' largest private health system, Advocate Aurora Health, as hospital professionals reflect on a year unlike any other. There's a sense of normalcy inside the COVID unit at Advocate Lutheran General Hospital in Park Ridge. But a year ago this time, providers feared the worst.
We, as a country, were not prepared.
Dr. Robert Citronberg is Advocate Aurora Health's chief of infectious disease. He says doctors were hamstrung as an onslaught of cases came their way, with so much yet unknown about the virus.
We didn't know how to properly ventilate them. We didn't know what medications might work or not work. So really, we were going in blind. Citronberg says that initial wave of COVID-19 led to a high rate of death, many patients dying alone, bewildered about what was happening to them. I saw a few patients who said exactly the same thing. I had no idea how bad this was. I should have taken it more seriously, and that was right before they got put on a ventilator or before they died.
It was very emotional to see patients, do so well and then all of a sudden, decline the next minute.
Sweta Gandhi is the clinical manager of Lutheran General's COVID unit. She said the frenetic pace and constant death took its toll on healthcare workers, with some leaving their jobs.
We were seeing a lot of patients that were transitioning to either hospice or ending their life, and they just could not handle that anymore.
When the pandemic first came, in fairness, I think most of us in the provider community were very quickly got battle weary. This was very stressful, very fast.
Jim Skogsberg is the CEO of Advocate Aurora Health. He says the stress was compounded by a rapidly diminishing supply of gloves, masks, and other PPE.
We scoured the globe, not just the country, but the globe, for personal protective equipment.
As you reflect on the last year, the last 12 months, and everything that transpired, is there anything that particularly stands out for you?
To combat some of the fear and uncertainty, Skogsberg says he took on the unlikely role of TV host and moderator. He started a bi-weekly program with Chicago Tonight-style interview panels to spread information to the healthcare system's 75,000 employees.
Let's use this medium, this venue, to communicate and be transparent about what's going on, to be clear about where we're going, how we're going to get there, and to answer all the questions that people naturally have during a time of such stress and strife and strain.
He says it has been key to keeping the organization together. Although Advocate's sheer size, with hospitals across Illinois and Wisconsin, worked to its advantage, it allowed the transfer of equipment and staff from one place to another during the peak of the pandemic. By late summer, the number of inpatients dropped to around 200 per day, but the second wave hit in October, and cases again skyrocketed.
1, 2, 3.
This time, Gandhi says her staff was prepared to save more lives with proven treatments, including proning patients struggling to breathe onto their stomachs.
We all learned about it in nursing school. We never actually put it into action in real life, and during this time we were able to go back to that.
The hospital's next hurdle was convincing non-COVID patients to come back for routine care and elective surgeries. The diminishment of those services, along with the high cost of COVID, nearly wiped out the system's finances.
2020 was financially a disaster, unmitigated disaster.
Skogsberg says the system has recovered thanks to federal CARES Act relief and a recent uptick in non-COVID business. To get a sense of how quickly things have changed, there were nearly 1,200 COVID inpatients throughout this health system during the latest peak in late November. That number today is 170. Hospital officials say they believe the worst is over, with most of the staff vaccinated. But they say they've learned how quickly things can turn bad.
We have made so much progress, but this is not the time to let up our guard.
There will be a next thing. There will be. We're ready for whatever comes our way.
Advocate Aurora Health says it treated a total of nearly 3 million patients throughout Illinois and Wisconsin last year. And this Thursday we'll have a 1-hour special marking 1 year of COVID-19 shutdowns in Illinois. We'll share insights from public health and government officials, hear from business owners, and shine a light on racial and ethnic disparities brought on by the pandemic. Again, that's this Thursday at 7 on Chicago Tonight. And up next, how Chicago area theaters are gearing up to reopen, so please stick around.
Earlier today, the Ravinia Festival and Wrigley Field announced schedules for summer concerts. A long-awaited return to in-person events after both venues canceled their 2020 slate of shows. Live theater is eyeing a return as well, with the Chicago Shakespeare Theater and Oak Brook's Drury Lane planning to get back on stage in the fall. Joining us to talk about what audiences and artists can expect are Barbara Gaines, founder and artistic director of the Chicago Shakespeare Theater, actor and musician Robert Cornelius, and Chicago Tribune chief theater critic, Chris Jones. Thanks to all of you for joining us on Chicago Tonight. Robert, let's start with you, please. Are you hearing from colleagues who are eager to return to live theater?
Absolutely. I think, we are really anxious to get back. We're looking forward to being in a room together. Theater is about collaboration, so it's always, it's been difficult, adjusting to this new platform. And we've gotten a lot of work done, but we've built a really strong community, and so we're in touch a lot. And everybody's looking forward to get back. We just want to make sure that we are safe, and that the patrons are safe, and that the theaters are supporting us as much as they possibly can when we do get back. But yeah, everybody I know cannot wait to get on the stage again, for sure. We have ghost lights in the theater when they're dark, and there are lights shining all over the city, and we're just really looking forward to extinguishing that and getting back to rehearsal and performing.
And Barbara, what are the factors that Chicago Shakes is considering as you make this plan for returning to live performances?
Right. Well, the first and most important thing is safety for everyone who works in the building and for all audiences. So we've worked with scientists pretty regularly since a year ago, and we're working on extremely safe protocols and to make sure that no one has any worries when they come back to the theater. I mean, I think it's going to be, I think we're going to have to all get used to gathering again, but I think the joy of being together is a factor that will keep the wind at our back going forward.
And Chris, how much of this is dependent on the regulations that the government puts in place?
Well, all of it. I mean, I think as we sit here right now, you can't have more than 50 people in an indoor venue. And I think we're all expecting that to change, probably in a matter of a couple of days, maybe a week at the most. I don't think we know yet exactly what those regulations are going to be. One of the issues that theaters have faced is that the industry is very much set up for full houses. That's kind of a barometer of success in the theater. And especially for commercial shows, it's very difficult to do a big musical with a cast of 40 people and only allow 25% capacity. And I think that's the reason really why the shutdown, seems to be so long even into the fall, because the numbers just don't add up for producers. So I think the question now is going to be, is there a sort of a sweet spot where people feel safe and performers feel safe and performers unions feel happy, and at the same time there's enough people there that you can actually cover the costs of doing the show? And that's where we're at right now, I think.
And on that note, Chris, you just mentioned unions. What kind of a factor is the Actors Equity Union in reopening?
Well, it's a colossal factor because the union really dictates what its members do. So, I mean, if it's not a union-approved show, then most equity members aren't going to be working there. And so it's crucial that the union is brought along, you might say. And the union has a legitimate job of taking care of performers. That's what it exists to do. And I think that's crucial. But it's also, of course, a national union. So that means that you have to sort of have a situation where there are national agreements, whereas it's not as simple as saying, Barbara saying and Robert saying we're happy. It just doesn't work that way. It has to be worked out in a more complicated way, I think.
And Robert Cornelius, what sort of safety precautions would you like to see in place?
Well, I mean, I think that the government is taking the lead on that. I think that that's really important, to just follow the science and follow, the researchers and figure out what is the best and safest way. I feel like, if we can get to herd immunity, that would be a big deal for all of us. We'd be able to move around a lot more freely. I feel like, I think that, it's important for us to be make sure that we are taken care of, that we are taken care of emotionally, that we are taken care of mentally. There was a piece, the reason that I'm here again is because of the piece that we did with Collaboration about checking in on each other and making sure that we are all okay and surviving through this as a community, because, the only way we can move forward is together.
And Barbara Gaines, how difficult for theater artists has this past year been? Because many of them are largely unable to work.
Right. It's just been a miserable year in terms of the ability to work. And I mean, our jobs really, all the artists, they've just been taken away. And there are extraordinarily, people who are suffering greatly, and our hearts go out to them. We want this virus to end soon. But I really agree with what Robert just said. We really have to take care of each other. Not just in terms of social distancing, but also emotionally, because this has taken a great toll on everyone, probably across the world. And for the performing arts, it's been devastating. And yet, out of darkness comes light, and the lights one day, hopefully in a few months, will shine again, because all of our hearts need that very much.
Chris, what do you think audiences can expect?
Well, I think my prediction, which has been wrong before about 4 times in this whole thing, but my current thinking is that the big theaters will be back in the fall. That will happen. That come September, everybody will be opening at once, and we'll have a really great fall. And I think that in the summer we're going to have, I hope, a really cool outdoor entertainment season. So places like Ravinia, Grant Park, maybe even Wrigley Field, assuming that all works out. There's going to be a lot of great outdoor entertainment. And I think some great, what you might think of as local entertainment, where shows that can be put together more quickly, maybe that are a bit more spontaneous in how they plan. That there's a window, I think, where the big guns aren't going to be ready because it takes, a while to get all that prepared. There's going to be, I hope, a sort of an organic summer of live entertainment for people. And I think it's true that the theater's audience skews a little older than a lot of other forms of entertainment. And in some ways, that's going to be an advantage because those folks are mostly vaccinated. And the vaccinated folks.
And many Chicago theaters have shown us in this past year that they can be creative with still keeping their artists up to work. So I'm sure we'll see some more creativity as we go forward. My thanks to Barbara Gaines, Robert Cornelius, and Chris Jones.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And for more on this story, you can visit our website. That's WTTW.com/news. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, decades later, a renewed push for the Equal Rights Amendment. Members of Illinois' congressional delegation weigh in. Illinois Comptroller Susana Mendoza on how the state plans to spend its stimulus dollars in her own family's battle with COVID-19.
Hello Central, give me 609.
And meet the woman who styled Viola Davis's hair in the film Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. She received an Oscar nom this week. But first, some more of today's top stories. A city agency says it has questions for General Iron over its proposal to move a recycling facility from Lincoln Park to a southeast side community. In a letter, the Chicago Department of Public Health is asking parent company Reserve Management Group about the interaction between the proposed metal shredding facility and businesses the company owns nearby. RMG says it's building a, quote, modern new facility that will operate independently alongside other RMG companies functioning in the area. CPDH has asked for a Thursday meeting with the company. A coalition of activists have staunchly opposed General Iron's relocation. And you can read more of their reaction on our website. And the quarterback shuffle begins for the Chicago Bears. The team is reportedly signing free agent quarterback Andy Dalton to a one-year, $10 million deal. Dalton played 9 years with the Cincinnati Bengals before joining the Dallas Cowboys last season. The three-time Pro Bowler will join a Bears quarterback room with Nick Foles, the only quarterback currently under contract for the 2021 season. The move to sign Dalton likely ends Mitch Trubisky's tenure with the team. The Bears finished 8-8 last season. And Loyola's favorite men's basketball fan and perhaps the team's lucky charm, Sister Jean, will be heading to the big dance to watch the Ramblers play.
These young men, several of them are seniors and played in 2018, and they were only freshmen, but they were all on the floor and played in the Final Four. And so their one desire was to be on that dance floor again when they were seniors. And so they have their dream now. So I'm sure they'll work harder than anything.
You'll recall Sister Jean Dolores Schmidt was courtside cheering for the team at every game during its Cinderella run into the Final Four back in 2018, making her a nationally known figure. Initially, the university said that she would not be able to attend, but has since changed course. 8th-seeded Loyola meets 9th-seed Georgia Tech this Friday at 3. And now to Paris with more from local members of Congress. Paris.
Thanks, Brandis. Earlier in the program, we discussed immigration legislation. Now Representatives Robin Kelly, Adam Kinzinger, and Raja Krishnamurthy join us once again. Congressman Krishnamurthy, let's talk about the economic stimulus. The House is taking up an extension right now of the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program. Why is that needed?
Unfortunately, a lot of the payroll protection program funds ended up going to connected businesses with relationships with banks, and really cut out a lot of the smaller businesses and some of the ones that, quite frankly, need the money the most. And so what we did in this particular American Rescue Plan was at least two things. One, establish certain grant programs so that certain types of businesses could get access to them, such as restaurants, which are absolutely getting decimated in my district and pretty much everywhere in this country. And then secondly, making sure that more types of lenders, more diverse lenders are able to participate so that we can get money into underserved areas and to smaller and smaller businesses that are still struggling. Without these types of extensions, we're not going to be able to revive the businesses that will help power our economy forward.
And Congressman Kinzinger, the Small Business Association Inspector General found something like 4,200 businesses were accidentally paid twice by the PPP, underscoring some of the hiccups with this system. Why should Americans have confidence that these loans will get into the right hands? Small businesses, not giant corporations that don't need them.
Well, I think you have to look at the grandiosity of this program. And really, a month, this program was written in something that we never expected. It was really successful, and I think keeping the economy on idle. We're about to see a massive resurge of the economy, and I think that can be largely in part thanks to the payroll protection program. But I tell you, when you roll some out that quickly, and even if you take a year or two to do it, you're going to have things that fall through the crack, and you can turn them into, outrageous stories, or you can actually just look at it, learn from it, and make it better. And so I think we need to be very careful to just try to find the outrage and look at this and say, this was actually a very successful program. It goes to show that the government can play a role in moments like this, but there is still nothing that replaces the free market. And this helped keep the free market, the coals on the fire, and hopefully we're ready to take off soon.
All right, I want to move on to the Equal Rights Amendment. Congresswoman Kelly, the House is considering removing a deadline to have states ratify this amendment, although a judge ruled that it's too late. I mean, the process has to start over because there was a deadline for states to either support this or not. So what do you want the House to do at this point?
Well, I want us to pass the legislation. Women are still paid less for doing the same work as men. Women business owners don't have the same access to capital that men have, and women still don't have full autonomy over their own bodies. This legislation is needed, so I want us to push on and hopefully pass it.
Congressman Krishnamurthy, does Congress need to start over on an amendment given the deadline that was in this initial amendment, or can it just make that deadline moot?
I'd like to see it become moot, and I'd like to see us continue the fight to get this ratified. I'm just reminded of that Gloria Steinem saying, you know, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. And at this point in time, that saying is even more true. And yet we're not treating women the way that we should. And we have to make sure that this Equal Rights Amendment passes so that my daughter and everyone else can enjoy the full benefits and privileges of being American and can really live up to their God-given potential.
Congressman Kinzinger, moving on to Capitol safety, where is the country right now on a 9/11 type commission to really probe and get to the bottom of all the events on January 6th? It appears that some of these congressional efforts have stalled a little bit.
Yeah, it's sad. We're really nowhere. I actually think what we need to do, and you know, there's a billion ideas floated. I think we actually need 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, 4, whatever that is. I think we should look at like retired members of Congress that are not going to be out there to make political points, to take a real look at what happened in the rhetoric, what happened in the security, and get to the bottom line of this. I mean, there's no doubt that there are members of Congress and the former president that fomented what happened on January 6th. That needs exposed. I'm sure that will be also through the legal system. But then to find out, you know, why was the Capitol so easily broken into, when I think all 3 of us on this call assume that there were plans in place for, if something like that happened, being evacuated, reinforced doors and everything else. So we do need answers, and I just hope we can get away from the politics of what this means and actually get to the safety of it. And that's why I think moving it into the realm of possibly retired members that have a lot of respect and nothing to gain or lose might be a good solution.
When you say the members of Congress and their actions, do you believe some of those members do have legal exposure for whatever their role might have been?
Yeah, certainly. I think if you are at a rally inciting violence or inciting insurrection, and that's actually be a legal decision, not one I can make, but then you certainly bear that like any other citizen would. The only thing we have as members of Congress that are protected is speech and debate. That basically covers what we say on the floor and those communications with each other. But that doesn't mean that we can go out in front of a crowd and incite violence. We have a First Amendment right in this country, but that doesn't include yelling fire in theater.
Congresswoman Kelly, what about that? Is there an appetite to put together an equally bipartisan commission? Speaker Pelosi has said she wanted 7 Democrats, 4 Republicans. What about Congressman Kinzinger's request there?
I would certainly agree with it. I'm fine with an equal number of Democrats and an equal number of Republicans. We were all put in danger, and I do think some of our colleagues should face some consequences for what they did. They put our lives in danger. I was one of the people left in the gallery on my hands and knees praying that I was going to get out with about 20, 25 of my other colleagues. So I would be fine with something put together where it's, 5 and 5. But I think we do need to do something to further investigate what happened. And I do think those colleagues that were involved, that they should certainly get in trouble. The tour that went on the day before, the speaking at the rally, we need to look at all of that.
In fact, we did talk to all 3 of you either on that day or around that day, and you all spoke to the terror that you did feel that way. We're going to have to leave it there. Our thanks to Representatives Robin Kelly, Adam Kinzinger, and Raja Krishnamurthy. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now to Phil Ponce for a one-on-one with Illinois' Comptroller. Phil.
Paris, the state of Illinois is set to receive $7.5 billion as part of the COVID-19 stimulus package passed by Congress this month. That's on top of $5.5 billion that will be distributed to municipalities across Illinois, including Chicago. But the influx of federal money isn't exactly a blank check. So how can this money be spent in a state that's long faced numerous fiscal challenges? Joining us with more is Illinois Comptroller Susana Mendoza. She's the state officer that actually pays the state's bill. Comptroller Mendoza, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, this money, more than $7 billion, when does the state get it exactly?
So we should be seeing about 3.75 billion of the 7.5 billion within the next 60 days. We don't know the exact day yet, but that's our expectation. The remainder of that, so the other 3.75 billion, we likely will not see until almost a year from now, towards the end of the fiscal year.
So what is the top priority? As the person who pays the bills, what bills are you going to be paying first?
So without a doubt, the top priority is to pay back the borrowing that we did from the Federal Reserve just to get through the pandemic. And that was about $3.1 billion. We've already paid a little bit of that back, but we still have a significant, almost 2.5 or so that has yet to be paid back. And that is priority number one. As you know, Phil, all of these funds there are stipulations that they can only go towards paying for COVID-related expenses. So the borrowing is the first and foremost that will, I think, make the markets very happy, the rating agencies, to see that we're going to be very fiscally responsible on how we spend these critical dollars. We also would like to pay a little bit down on our bill backlog. You might remember that I inherited what was at that time from the prior governor, a $16.7 billion bill backlog. That's how bad it got. Today, I've whittled that down to about $5.4 billion. And I'd like to put some towards paying that down some more related to COVID. And then, of course, we'd like to use some of those important federal dollars to help small businesses across Illinois that have been devastated by the pandemic and, to stimulate economic growth and job creation. So there's only so much to go around, but we're going to make the best use of every dollar and stretch it as far as humanly possible.
The funds have very few strings attached, as I understand it, but one of them is that money cannot spend to help pay down pension debt. Correct. Is that a bad thing?
It is. I mean, we have to pay back our borrowing first and foremost, and I want to make sure as controller that we do everything we can to make sure that we do not have any further credit downgrades. All the contrary. We actually just in the middle of this pandemic last week went from a negative outlook to a stable outlook with Standard & Poor's. And so that's a really great thing. I can't stress enough how important that is, that in the middle of a pandemic, Illinois actually went from negative to stable. So that's as a result of the smart fiscal management that we've had. I'm very proud of how we've handled the finances. And, as a Democrat, I will cede no train to anyone that we are not fiscally responsible in managing taxpayer monies the way they should be. So no, not a penny of this will go towards mistakes of the past or pension debt or anything like that. We're going to be fiscally solvent. That is the goal. And we're trying to stabilize our finances and inject some predictability and stability into our financial picture here.
You mentioned that the state right now, that you've whittled it down to, quote, only $5.4 billion. That was down from $16 billion. How much of a dent will could this money make on that $5.4 billion in unpaid state bills?
So to start, it won't make much because, if we do the math here, we borrowed about $3.1 billion. We've paid some of that down, but we still have about $2.5 billion left that we could put towards that $3.75 billion. So, what the exact number is that will go towards the bill backlog, we don't know yet until we actually receive the money. But some of that will be put towards that. And then we need to have enough left over, hopefully, to be able to inject some financial aid to these businesses across Illinois who have been hurting tremendously. It's important to get people back to work, to help these small businesses recover, and to stimulate job creation and economic growth.
This conversation you and I are having has to do with big picture issues. You're looking at the situation from 20,000 feet in the sky, so to speak. But COVID has been a very personal thing for you. Tell us about that.
Yes, it has. My brother, Joaquin, who's a detective sergeant with the police department in Chicago, back in November, I called him on his birthday to wish him a happy birthday, and he had a cough. 2 days later, he's only 56. He was at Northwestern Memorial Hospital fighting for his life for 41 days. And then about a month later, in a month he spent in an inpatient rehab. He's had tremendous complications, has suffered many strokes in his brain while he was in the hospital, total complete kidney failure, so he'll need to be on dialysis for the rest of his life. And I share it because I think it's important for people to know that when we hear about a 99% survival rate, think about my brother's situation. Sure, he survived and it's a blessing for us, but it breaks my heart to see the complications for somebody who's dedicated his life to public service and to protecting the public, that he's going through this. And it's no joke. This is very real, and we're thankful that he's still with us, but many people are going through something similar. Many people have lost their loved ones. And I take this very, very seriously, both as a sister and as a controller. When we have to order things like body bags, it really hits close to home. And I just ask people, please get vaccinated the first chance you get. Please do everything to protect yourself and protect your loved ones. And let's get through this together.
You mentioned before we went on the air that your brother actually has moved in with you and you're providing care for him. What is it you want people to realize about what you're going through?
Well, I would just say it's pretty devastating, and I'm so thankful that I could take care of my brother right now when he needs me. And there's so many families who probably feel completely overwhelmed, and I was one of them. I mean, honestly, I never thought I'd tell you that the easiest part of my life right now is managing billions in state debt, but it truly is. I feel so confident and sure of what I'm doing as the controller, but it's certainly a lot heavier of a lift to try to keep my brother healthy. That's where we're at. Thank you for asking. I mean, it is something that I can relate to, and I know we're not alone. Lots of families in Illinois and across the country are going through similar or even worse scenarios with having lost loved ones, but it's real, and I just ask you to take care of yourselves, please.
Susana Mendoza, thank you very much for this update, and all the best to your brother.
Thank you so much. Please keep him in your prayers. I think prayers are very helpful. Appreciate it.
You bet. And up next, a conversation with the first black woman to be nominated for an Oscar for Best Makeup and Hairstyling. But first, a look at the weather.
Ma Rainey made history as the mother of blues. Movie watchers get an earful of her music and her story in the film Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which depicts a recording session in 1920 Chicago. Not too far from Chicago, history is also being made. A Gary, Indiana native is one of the first black women to be nominated for an Oscar in makeup and hairstyling. Joining us is Mia Neal, the hair department head for the film Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, and who is making Oscar history alongside her colleague Jamaica Wilson as the first black woman nominated in makeup and hairstyling. Mia Neal, congratulations and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So what was your reaction to this news when you learned that you had received this nomination, but that you're actually making Oscar history with this nomination?
I know. Listen, the whole thing just feels like it's hard to explain. I feel like I'm having an out-of-body experience. It's just hard to believe that all of that is happening. You know, like you go to work, you do your job, and especially when you work behind the scenes, you're not used to having anything in the spotlight, you know? And so for that to happen, like at this caliber, it's unbelievable. I'm so grateful. Extremely grateful.
Now, part of your job was nailing the hairstyles for the 20s for black people, both in Chicago, but also, you know, maybe at a tent in the country, on the road. What did you look to for inspiration for those?
So there are only like 7 photographs of Ma Rainey herself, which is really interesting. And I could only find 2 while I was doing the research. Now, I look up a lot of photographs of like Harlem Renaissance and that sort of thing, because a lot of the people that, you know, did that Great Migration, they came from down south and they came to the north and sort of landed in Harlem. And so there are a lot of photographs there that really kind of depict both kind of Southern and, you know, very much so city looks of the 20s. The research part is actually one of my favorite parts whenever I get a film. Just, you know, going through there, I usually look up a lot of photographers, like black photographers of the time, and I go off of the photographs that they used. And so that's what I did. And as far as Ma Rainey goes, there was something written that Ann Roth, the costume designer, found that said that she wore horsehair wigs. And so we decided that we should definitely go with that since we couldn't find that many facts about how she looked. And so that was interesting. It was the first time I made a wig out of horsehair, which is nothing like human hair. And I had no idea it was going to show up covered in lice and manure. So that also was interesting. And and so from there, I just built that wig and actually realized why Ma probably wore horsehair wigs, because after setting the wig, it maintained its styling, almost like today's synthetic wig. So I didn't have to reset it. And I assumed, a Black woman traveling in the 20s from town to town performing, who knew if there was a salon there that she could be serviced, So she needed like a wig to maintain that. And that's probably why she wore horsehair wig, was for the continuity of it.
So something, obviously, that now that you know, probably we'll know to use it in the future as well if needed.
I don't know.
Hopefully it will be covered in manure and lice. Yeah. So here's a clip from the film with film star, of course, Viola Davis.
I never could stand no silence. I always had to have some music going on in my head somewhere. It keeps things balanced. Music could do that. It fills things up. More music you have in the world, full it is.
So what was it about Ma Rainey's story that attracted you to the film? And also, what did you learn about her through styling her character, through styling her hair?
Well, I definitely learned about the horsehair wig and the continuity of it. I think that just Ma Rainey herself was such a complex woman, right? Like, this was a woman who grew up in the rural, southern part of Georgia. She changed her name, moved, came from probably would have been sharecroppers. If you think about it, she's the first generation born free in this country of her family. And she just did not, also being a dark-skinned woman, a lot of people who wrote about her described her as the most unattractive woman in show business. And so just having like all of these things and just realizing that, I'm still going to go out and get everything I want in this life, no matter the obstacles. She didn't follow any rules, which is just highly respected when you think about a woman in the 20s, woman of color, like just all boundaries broken. She had a husband and a girlfriend. She wore fur coats in the summertime, like this woman, gold teeth, like the whole nine. There's just something about that you have to respect, that, her life could have been in danger during this time. She spoke to men like men speak to men during that time. And so I learned that this was a very brave woman who was way ahead of her time. And, I'm glad that George C. Wolfe and Denzel and August Wilson and that, all of this came together so that people now know her, because she really had been erased. And hopefully people will not only watch the movie, but go and read about her and look up other things, because she really was an interesting woman.
And Mia, Neil, best of luck to you at the Oscars, and congratulations again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it, especially, Chicago. Hey, Chicago. Hey, Gary, Indiana. Thanks.
Shout out to Gary Paris. And that is our show for this Tuesday night.
Please join us tomorrow night live at 7. The Illinois House is back in Springfield. Our Spotlight Politics team has the highlights.
And a business that rents out kitchen space to restaurants is stirring the pot. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud of its partners named Illinois Leading Lawyers by the Law Bulletin Publishing Company of Chicago.